Well, welcome back to Experiencing God, the 12-week study by Dr. Henry Blackaby that helps us seek and do the will of God. Well, this week we're going to be talking about making adjustments that put us in position to obediently follow God and participate in the work that He's doing. And making major adjustments is kind of a scary thing, because when we talk about making major adjustments, we're talking about things like relocation, moving our family, changing jobs, changing friends, relationships, maybe even some of our deep-seated attitudes and way of thinking about who God is and how He works, attitudes about our prejudices, our attitudes about other people. So we talk about making major adjustments. That's really a big deal for us. And so the first question that comes to my mind is, why would God ask me to make these major adjustments? Why can't I just come alongside Him and just participate in His work? Well, we may not know the full answer. We can come up with some ideas, starting with, that's the way God works with people. Take a look at the Bible stories we know. Abram's a classic example. God asked Abram to leave where he was, leave his homeland, leave everything he knew, and to follow him, not knowing exactly where he was going, but that was the first step. He needed to get him to adjust. And then later, through obedience, he became the father of a nation. Noah had to adjust. He had to stop doing what he's doing and start building an ark. David had to adjust. No longer could he be tending sheep and also be the king. The early disciples, they were fishermen. They had to leave their fishing business, their occupation, their livelihood, what they had known their entire lives in order to follow Jesus. And yes, Jesus too constantly made adjustments in his life in order to stay in the will of God so that he could be obedient to God and participate in the work that he saw the Father doing. So we know that's the way God works with us. We also can guess that God wants us to surrender our all, as the hymn goes, to Him, because we need to get rid of the competing gods in our life. And so that is maybe a reason why He asks us to make adjustments. Perhaps another reason is because it's for our own good. Anytime we make adjustments that God's asking us to, it's good for God, it's part of God's plan, but it's generally good for us, even though we may not see that until we look back years from now on that experience. So God asks us to make adjustments for many reasons. Why do we have to make the adjustment before obedience comes in? Well, there was three truths that Dr. Blackaby talked about this week, and one is we can't stay where we are and go where God is at the same time. His ways, His purposes, who He is, they are so different from us that we have to leave what we do. We have to leave our ways, our will, our purposes, and go follow Him. You know, there's a verse from Luke 9:23 that we were given this week that says, if anyone would come after me, he must deny himself and take up his cross daily and follow me. And so it just leads us to understand that the importance of that. But then there's a second truth that Dr. Blackaby gives us, which is that major adjustments can be costly to us and those around us. It's never easy making one of these adjustments, knowing that others are going to also pay that high cost. Moses, in the story from Exodus, he made an adjustment when he went to Pharaoh and asked Pharaoh to let his people go free. And as a result of that, the people paid a high cost. We know that Pharaoh increased the hardship on the Israelites. So adjustments are not to be taken lightly. They can be very costly for us, and they can be costly for others. Also, a third truth about these adjustments is that they put us in a position where we must be totally dependent on God. God never calls us to do things that we can do on our own. He calls us to do the things that He's doing, and those are things that we can only do through Him. So one of the adjustments is an adjustment to become totally dependent on God. Well, none of us like to be totally dependent on anyone. And so this just goes against our nature. And yet this is how God creates the relationship or brings us, draws us into this relationship that's based on trust, is when we trust Him to do things that only He can do. One of the other reasons that I think that God wants us to be totally dependent on Him when we make these adjustments is because I think about the memory verse we had from John 15:5 earlier in this study that said, apart from Him, I can do nothing. And it's just a reminder to us that God's work is going to be done God's way. He's calling us to participate and build relationships with us to become a part of that. Well, let's take a look at the memory verse for this week from Luke 14:33. Any of you who does not give up everything he has cannot be my disciple. Well, those are strong words, and they challenge us. And yet, at the same time, knowing that all God wants us to do is to give us his all. All God wants us to do is to give Him our all. He isn't concerned about the results we're able to accomplish. He just wants us to come alongside Him in relationship. Well, I hope you'll be here with us next week when we talk about the seventh reality, which is obedience, experiencing God through obedience. Until next week, I hope you have a great week and God bless you. Goodbye.